Penn State fans, we are back on the Blue White Breakdown podcast. Bob Flounders, Max, Ralph. We're recording this on a Thursday morning. Max was at practice Wednesday night. He's got a story up on PennLive with some injury updates, significant injury updates. Check that out. We're going to discuss that. We're going to preview Penn State's whiteout game with the mighty Washington Huskies, get to our picks, and whatever else maybe Max might have on his mind. But Max, it's good to see you. It still feels like late summer in Harrisburg as we record this. It's supposed to be in the low 70s. I know State College isn't necessarily always as warm as Harrisburg, but hopefully you'll get some nice weather today after you're done your work. And that's all you can ask for, Max, on November 7th.
That's absolutely right, Bob. Great to see you this morning. The weather was great yesterday. It's been pretty good all week. I think it's supposed to cool off a little bit today, being like the 60s. Same deal tomorrow. Trying to get out on the golf course.
You can do it.
We'll see. Might have to wear some sleeves, but we'll power through. But yeah, no, it's been good weather. Can't really complain.
Okay, Max. So there's a couple obvious questions that Penn State fans are thinking about this week with the whiteout game up. One of them relates to a hangover from the Ohio State game. I don't know if James was asked about it. I do know, though, that during the amount of time you got to watch practice, you had some pretty good observations, and I think Franklin had some pretty good comments about the health status of not only the obvious candidates, guys, like Denai Dennis Sutton and Anthony Donko, but also some other players that maybe really could help Penn State's depth in the final month or so of the season.
Yeah, Bob. It was honestly a little bit of a surprise. We walked out there and kind of what I usually do. They have the two fields, one for offense, one for defense. Usually when I'm out there by myself, I head over to the defense first, just to kind of get any notes out of the way, and then spend most of my time at the offense because, generally speaking, people care more about offense. But today I walked over to the defense and I see somebody wearing number 32, and I'm like, wait a second, is that a scout team guy or is that Keon Wiley? And sure enough, it was Keon Wiley, which is huge for Penn State. I mean, this is a guy who, when James Franklin was asked about him last night, he said it again. This is a guy they were excited about, thought he was going to contribute and be a key piece of that linebacker rotation this year, and suffered a significant injury in the spring and didn't have any on-field activity until this week, as far as we know, at least publicly that we've seen. So good to see him out there. What James Franklin said about his status is that it's kind of just a wait and see based on how he feels and how trainers feel. But they've said in the past that he's going to be on the field at some point this season. So assuming these Penn State Nittany Lions make it to a postseason with a playoff or anything, I would anticipate seeing Keon Wiley out there on the field at some point. Really important. That was the big one. I will add on to that. We saw him with the defensive line, which was a little bit odd. He was doing some pass rushing drills, but what James Franklin said was there's no position change there. He didn't mention this specifically, but if I had to make a guess as to why he was doing that, it's because last year he was pretty involved in their third down pass rush package. And so I'm guessing he's probably still going to be a part of that from the middle linebacker spot, and they just wanted him to get some work on the pass rush moves. But I'll go rapid fire with the other ones, Bob, since I was long-winded with Keon. Denai Dennis Sutton out there doing drills, good sign, because he was in some pain last week. Only played 5 snaps, but James Franklin said he felt better this Sunday than last Sunday. He should be good to go. In what capacity, not sure, but expect him to be out there. We saw Quentin Martin back, the number 3 running back. He is he's an important piece now, which was not necessarily the plan coming into the year, but after Cam Wallace got hurt, he was thrust into that number 3 spot. I do think if they can do it, they're still going to preserve his red shirt. But he was back out there at practice. He warmed up in uniform last weekend, which is something Penn State has done with players still being ruled out. Probably a pretty good sign he'll be ready to go this weekend, if not next. Anthony Donko out there looked to be moving a little bit better than he was last week. And even though he was pretty clearly hobbled last week, he still played 38 snaps against Ohio
Yeah.
State. So no real concerns there. Trying to think. I think there was one more that I'm forgetting. Caden Saunders. There he is. Wide receiver / punt returner. He didn't look great. I'll be honest. He didn't look like he was 100%, but he was back out on the field for the first time in a while. He just didn't look like he was moving at full capacity, which we haven't really seen all year from him. He's had a dragging injury, as James Franklin titled it, and guy they would like to have back because they thought coming into the year he could contribute offensively and as a punt returner. But Zion Tracy has kind of taken over that punt returning role and done a pretty good job with it. So Caden Saunders was practicing, didn't look 100%. Those are all the injury updates I had for you, Bob.
Yeah, so just sifting through that information, and it was good stuff, Max. I think Zion Tracy's emergence, I don't know how to sugarcoat it. I think Caden Saunders is less of a priority to get healthy, just because Zion Tracy is dangerous as a punt returner. I think he's only going to get better. He is a big play athlete, as we've learned. Whenever he's been on the field at corner, he had a huge play, obviously, in the Ohio State game. I think he's got a very bright future, not only in Penn State's secondary, but also on special teams. And I also think this, Max, and I want to get your take on it. Before the Ohio State game, James really talked at length. I think he talked about it on the Monday before the game, and then after the Wednesday practice before the Ohio State game. And I do think this is important. Guys, the difference between being injured and hurt and guys who know how to get ready and deal with playing in pain. Not everyone can do it. It sounds to me, though, Anthony Donko is a guy in his second year that for him to gut through that game, the majority of that game against one of the best defenses in the country, and hold a pretty good accounting of himself, I think that really speaks volumes for his development, for what the coaching staff thinks of him. And this is something that if you're an offensive lineman especially, those guys in the NFL level, they're always hurt. They're playing with torn ligaments. They're playing with broken bones. They're never, ever, because they're just too big and the collisions are just too intense. I just think Anthony Donko really, really helped himself by being able to get through that game. And I think it says a lot about him as well.
Yeah, Anthony Donko is he's a fun one to talk to as well. I'll say when we get him for interviews, he's a really smart kid. You can just tell it. He's grown a ton in his pass blocking. He's always been a pretty good run blocker, but he's starting to learn how to use the length that he has. He's got really long arms in that passing game. And yesterday he was named to the Sean Alexander Freshman of the Year award semifinalist list, which was a little bit surprising. And especially this is a tangent, but I don't know if I would have redshirt freshmen winning that award if it were me, especially since redshirts can play in 4 games now. But anyway, that's beside the point. Donko's a really good player. Looked good last night. James Franklin was asked pretty pointedly, how much do you have to play through injuries at this point in the year last night at practice? And I mean, he said basically the same thing that you mentioned, Bob, that he's already talked about. It's a skill that they need because you're going to have bumps and bruises. People do it in the NFL too. And some of it is just making sure the younger guys who are dealing with things like Donko are capable of doing it and feel comfortable doing it. So it's absolutely a thing, Bob, right now. And I do think Donko is at the top of the list of guys who are battling injury but playing through it right now.
Yeah. Before we get to the analysis of the whiteout game, just one more note, because you wrote about this as well. I think the Washington game probably means a little bit more to one Penn State player who has had a huge role this year on the offense. I dare say that he is quickly becoming a fan favorite. He's got at least for the USC game, he had a pretty snazzy belt he wore on. He was wearing coming off the team bus. I don't know if he's still wearing it. I don't know if I want to go too far down the rabbit hole with this discussion, but Wenga Ione. I always pronounce his last name wrong. So Wenga, if you're listening, I know you are. I got your first name right. I just think Wenga is a guy that is such a big part of Penn State's future and present, a guy that could play center probably at a very high level if it wasn't for Nick Dawkins. But
Mhm.
Max, he was a guy that I thought, honestly, I thought JB Nelson was going to be the starting guard with Sal Wormley. And that's like a non-starter discussion right now. Like it's hard for JB to even get on the field. I don't know if he's still dealing with some kind of injury, but Wenga has been so good. And Andy Kotelnicki likes to use him in a pretty dastardly way in the run game when he motions him back out as a wide receiver, then motions him back in to block somebody who just gets plowed. But he's from Washington, the state of Washington, and I think the Huskies program was probably always on his mind growing up. But judging from your story, it sure sounds like he is up for this game, and I know I'm going to be watching him because when Wenga is motivated, that's a pretty fun thing to watch.
Yeah, no, I mean, Wenga's actually probably one of my favorite guys on the current team to do an interview with. He's got a good sense of humor. It shows up when you're asking him about it. I mean, that first time, I guess it wasn't the first time we saw him do the motion play.
Yeah.
But the first time, like, he kind of like caught everybody's attention against UCLA, and I wrote a pretty in-depth story about the play and just where it came from and everything.
Mm-hmm.
He was just like cracking up the whole time, smiling. He's a fun guy to talk to. And yeah, I mean, JB Nelson started more games than him last year before getting hurt and banged up a little bit. But I just think in his third year on campus, Wenga has made the strides that the staff wanted to see. Like they always say, you don't see too many guys that are 350 pounds and can move like Wenga can. And so like I just think that he's developed in a way that has made it really hard to keep him off the field. I think he's playing good football. PFF, take it with a grain of salt, whatever you want, but he has been their highest graded offensive lineman, just over Anthony Donko. So those two are kind of the cornerstones this year. And as for the Washington stuff, we talked to him on Tuesday. He's from Washington State, from Graham, which is about 50 miles from the University of Washington campus. And he knows some guys on the other side of the field. He said he knows some of the guys that are going to be bumping pads with him in the trenches, some of the defensive linemen. So he's definitely excited about it. I think his words were that some people. So his first offer out of high school was Washington, and he was committed to the Huskies for 6 months under head coach Jimmy Lake. But then Lake got fired, and Kalen DeBoer came in, and he decommitted, ended up flipping to Penn State. Whole process. But his words were that some people are telling him he made a mistake and he should have gone to Washington. But he was like, well, I guess we'll find out this weekend, because it was kind of the same thing as the Will Howard deal.
With shades of Will Howard.
Shades of Will Howard out there. But yeah, I think Wenga's pretty excited. He said his brother was coming out too. So definitely gonna be a good day for him.
Yeah, what I appreciate about Wenga, Max, and I am completely in line with your thinking, is I appreciate players, especially at a young age, that are all business on the football field. But I don't want to say, like, he doesn't take life super seriously off the field. Like he knows that there's got to be a balance, right? I think he enjoys playing football. I also think that Wenga is a guy that enjoys the time when he's not playing football, and I think that I mean that as a positive. Penn State fans that are a little bit longer in the tooth might remember a player by the name of Rich Ornberger, who was a key player on Penn State's 2008, 2007 teams, all Big Ten guard, I believe, as well, played in the NFL. Same kind of personality. You did not want to get in his way on the field, but he would always make you laugh. And he would always be smiling off the field. He's kind of a big personality. I think he ended up his career out on the West Coast. He's still kind of a big personality out there. But Wenga reminds me of him. Maybe Penn State, maybe if there's some older Penn State fans out there, they'll appreciate my reference, Max. But let's get to it, man. Penn State, Washington, 13.5. That's going to be the line, 13, 14. Total's pretty low. I think it's like 46, somewhere around there as we tape this. So before we get to picks, as we wrap up this Blue White Breakdown podcast, what are some of the things you're looking for, and what are some of maybe the matchups or positions that could decide this game.
Yeah, I think it's similar to the game last week, just on the other side of the ball, where Penn State's receivers are going to have to prove it against the Washington
Yeah.
secondary. Last week it was Ohio State's receivers against Penn State's secondary, but it's flipped because this Washington passing defense is second best in the country, 142 yards a game.
Yeah.
They're really good, which is kind of really impressive when you consider all the guys they lost to the NFL draft, or like a Jabbar Muhammad, who was a great corner that ended up going over to Oregon. Like they've lost a ton, and they've still come out, and Jed Fish has put a good defense out there on the field. And meanwhile, there's been, understandably so, a ton of talk about the Penn State wide receivers who only had 3 catches against Ohio State and not a whole lot of production with it. James Franklin said, yeah, we got to stretch the field more than we have. Teammates have defended the guys and said, they've made plays. They don't get enough credit. And while I think that's true, like different guys have gone over 100 yards this season. They've made big plays. You think about the Julian Fleming against USC, those 2 4th-down catches. Like, yes, I think it's a better group than last year by a pretty wide margin, but they still got to do more. And this weekend they're going to be tested.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the Washington pass defense, 142 yards allowed per game. I think, like you said, number 2 low. In terms of low numbers, that doesn't get much better than that. Max, I would just say one thing that I'm going to be really curious about. If you look at the teams that Washington's played in the Big Ten, a lot of them don't know how to throw a forward pass. They played Michigan, Iowa, Rutgers, Wisconsin. They did play USC last week, which Miller Moss threw 3 interceptions in that game and probably cost them the game, and he's not going to be starting moving forward. But other than the Trojans, I don't know how many feared passing attacks the Huskies have faced. I think that does explain the ranking, a lot of that ranking. But I do think that Penn State is going to have to make plays in the passing game. And I think if I was Penn State, I don't think I would be scared to throw the ball against these guys, because you look at some of those rushing numbers, and even the Indiana game, Max, when they went there, Indiana played with their backup quarterback, and they ran the ball like 55 times in that game. So they didn't even get to experience the IU passing attack that is just terrorizing the Big Ten. So I'm real curious to see just how good this Washington secondary is. I think the numbers, usually you say the numbers are inflated. In this case, they're deflated. So that's maybe the matchup that intrigues me the most. I think Penn State will go out of its way, I think, to establish these receivers. I think they have to. They have to put something on tape that's going to scare Big Ten defenses the rest of the way, because it's been an issue. But I do think that's one area that I'm going to be watching very closely. Just another thing, just the Wisconsin offense in Big Ten road games has been like pathetic. 51 points in 3 road games is not going to cut it. And another thing is, I don't know. I'm real curious to see how the Wisconsin offensive tackles hold up on the edge against Abdul, and especially if Denai is close to healthy, because they've given up 18 sacks. That's not a low number. And with the sound and the noise and the environment, I don't know that this offense is going to be ready for to be able to function maybe the way that they think they can function, just because of the noise.
Yeah, Baba, I think you said Wisconsin and you meant Washington.
I did mean Washington. My bad.
Yeah. No, you're all good. You're all good. I'm just covering you for our commenter. No, I think you bring up a good point. Big Ten offenses this year, especially, but even historically speaking, not a ton of passing the ball, especially the ones that Washington has played. But you know what? Even still, 142 yards a game is pretty low.
It is.
So, got to give them credit.
It's a lot for Iowa, Max. It's a lot for Iowa. I'll say that.
It's a lot for, you know what, Bob, though? The Iowa offense this year has shown some sparks. It's mostly come on the ground, but they've shown some sparks. But anyway, no, you're right. And I do think this Penn State pass rush is really, we had we had some concerns about it through the first couple weeks of the year. Only 2 sacks in 2 games.
Yeah.
And I really think they've hit their stride. I think Abdul is comfortable as an edge rusher right
He
now.
is.
I think some people were saying that a lot was made about the Ohio State offensive line last week and the injuries they were dealing with, and it didn't end up really being a factor in the game. I disagree with that wholeheartedly. Abdul Carter had 2 sacks, and the third tackle he made by the fourth quarter was on a third down when Will Howard was trying to scramble up in the pocket and make a first down pass, and he got him on the ground. Like Abdul was impactful in that Ohio State game, and without him, it could have been a lot uglier.
Yeah.
I think he's hitting his stride right now, and he's doing all the things that people put him in first-round NFL draft projections for. Deny, even depending on how healthy he is, I think that I think the staff really likes Amin Vanover, and I think for good reason. I think he's done some nice things, but I got to say I've been really impressed with Smith Vilbert this season. Kind of a wild card we didn't really know much about heading into the year, and I think he's done some really nice things. I do think Deny will be healthy enough to at least contribute on passing downs like he did against Ohio State. So yeah, giving up a ton of sacks, it's going to be a thing. And I think Penn State's defense is going to take advantage. They obviously struggled to stop the run a little bit against Ohio State, but you're going to do that when you've got probably the best running back duo in the country. I mean, look,
I think they are.
Singletary and Katron Allen are good. We know this. We see them every week. But Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson, I'm with you, Bob. They're a step above. So yeah, you're going to give up yards on the ground. I think this defense is really starting to hit its stride, and I think it's going to play a big part this weekend.
Okay, Max, the blue-white breakdown here. Thursday, 2 days before the whiteout game, the official whiteout game. I think it's the 16th. I think I saw in the notes the 16th official whiteout game.
Yeah.
So let's get to our picks. And I have to say, this year, this is game number 9. See, I got that math right. You and I have had the exact same score twice now. We had it last week against Ohio State. By the way, we did both have Ohio State. Not everyone at PennLive did. Not everyone. I think Joe Hermit did, but not everyone at PennLive did. I'm not trying to drop any names. We also had another score that we were like exactly right on.
Yeah.
I think I might have picked the score this week with in my mind saying there's no way, there's not a chance that Max and I will get this score the same, because I went to great lengths to try and make sure we did not duplicate it. But what do you think about this game? What do you think is maybe the key? And I'm pretty sure I know who you have winning, but I'm very curious to see about the margin of victory.
Yeah. Yeah, we've had some interesting score matching up, and we didn't plan it this time around, Bob. I did not look at what yours is, so I'm curious. Good. I'm very curious. But you know what? I said last week with the Ohio State game, they were going to have to make me see it to believe it, right? To beat them.
Yeah.
I watch a ton of baseball too. Like, I'm a traditionalist in sports. Like, I think a lot of times it goes off of a feeling more than the actual stats and analytics. I know that's not necessarily the popular way of thinking these days, but if your starting pitcher is only giving up 2 hits through the 7th inning, I'm throwing him back out there for the 8th kind of deal. So like, I've just seen this story before. Like the whiteout after a big loss. I think Penn State's I do still think Penn State is a top 10 team in the country this year. Yeah. I think they have a good level of talent, a good coaching staff this season, better than they've had in the past. Yeah. So I see no reason why this game would even be remotely close. I've seen it before. Iowa last year, we're all like, oh, Iowa's a good team. They've got one of the best defenses in the country. They get smacked 31-0 in the whiteout. Minnesota 2 years ago, not quite as good, but PJ Fleck puts out feisty teams every year. Right. Smacked in the whiteout. What was it? 45-17. It was. I don't see it. I think Washington is a fine team. I think they are a good middle of the pack Big Ten team this year, and Jed Fish is probably going to make them better in the future. He's a good coach. He's run good programs in the past, but they're not doing it this year. Penn State is crushing them in the whiteout. They've got that environment. They've got the skill. They got the talent. They've got the pissed off attitude after losing to Ohio State. It's a feeling thing. I'm blowing the total out of the water too. I'm giving it 38-17 Nittany Lions.
I'm writing this down. 38-17. And now that 21-7 night game that Penn State played against Illinois, it was not an official whiteout game, even though everyone was in white. And they probably should have had at least one more touchdown that was called back. That it would have been a 3-touchdown game. They were clearly better, Max.
Right.
And after Illinois scored on their first possession, they did very little. So there's a lot to be said for Penn State dominating teams that are not named Michigan or Ohio State in those environments. And even in those even when they played in a true whiteout game, I think even Michigan and Ohio State traditionally have really had their hands full against Penn State.
Especially Michigan. Go read Johnny McGonigal's story on PennLive about the Mo Bamba moment. There you go. Great segue, Bob.
Mo Bamba. So I have it. So I picked my score. I have it 26-16 Penn State. Max, I just have some questions about the health of the running game, Penn State's running game, and I'm a little curious about the wideouts and what happens if Washington just says, look, Tyler Warren is really going to have to work for it, man. They're really going to have to work for it. How many points can Penn State score if they can't run the ball the way that they ran the ball in September and against West Virginia, and they kind of just minimize Tyler Warren? That's my question. It could be field goals instead of touchdowns. I do think the defense, though, Penn State's defense is going to be the major storyline. I just have one more question for you. I just hope with Penn State trying to get into their first college playoff under Franklin, if the game is decided with 5 or 6 minutes to go, what I don't want to see, and I know that everyone's going to do it, and I'm not saying James Franklin's ever done it, I just don't want margin of victory and, hey, the game's already won. I don't want to see the first team still in there. Guys could get hurt and just scoring needless touchdowns. If you're up by, I think if Penn State wins out, they're in the playoff. They don't need to. If they get the advantage against Washington, I just hope. I don't want to see Penn State try and score kicking field goals with 2 minutes to go. I just think that's just not the way to go about it. I got a 26-16. You have it 38-17. We did not agree. I'm pretty pumped about that, Max.
Yeah, that's big. On the topic of scoring late field goals, you're also kind of in the point of no return with a lot of red shirts for freshmen. So it's not like you can even put a ton of second team guys in there and be comfortable with that. I think a lot of their freshmen this year have played in 2 or 3 games. So you're kind of teetering on, burning that red shirt, which they obviously don't want to do. So I think Penn State would throttle it down if it was not that close this week in the fourth quarter. And then just the one other thing with the college football playoff, I'm with you, Bob. They went out, they make it, and honestly, our first rankings this week that came out, putting Penn State at number 6 kind of confirms that, because they're still ahead of Indiana. So if you're at number 6 and you control your own, you might as well control your own destiny the rest of the way. The committee is not going to bump you 6+ spots if you win out. Like that's just, unless you win every game by 1 point against crappy Big Ten teams, the committee is not going to pull you out. So Penn State controls its own destiny. Got to win out, but if it does, that's a playoff.
Or one caveat, Max: don't finish 10-2 and lose to Purdue. That's my other caveat. Then you're out.
They're not making it if they lose to Purdue.
Out. Get out. You're not even welcome back in 2025 if you lose at Purdue.
You lose to Purdue this season, you do not get a preseason top 25 ranking next year. You wait. I almost said something too. You just can't lose to Purdue this year.
Right. Yeah. All right, Max. Good chatting with you. We'll be at the game at the Whiteout Experience. Keep checking back to PennLive for all of the content with Max, myself, Johnny McGonigal, Joe Herman's photos. It should be a fun environment, and Max, we get to sleep in on Saturday, so we also have that going for us.
That's right. Yeah, going to be a good one.